All right, so let's call the meeting to order, and good to see you all. Thank you for making the time tonight. Let's start with our first agenda item in the minutes from last month. Does anybody have anything to offer for changes, edits?
I do not.
I don't have them either.
No.
There were a couple of typos, but could I tell you where they were? I could probably not.
I didn't see any.
Oh, actually, here's
Typos.
one. Let's see, so page 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, starting with John said.
What page?
Page 3.
Yeah.
That second line down saying he is a steward,
Ah.
it should be steward,
Yeah, I got that
and a
one.
D.
Mhm. Page 2, and Pam isn't here to clarify, but there was, where is it? Sort of, that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th paragraph down, starting with Julie said,
Bravo.
ending, well, it says, Pam said you always get that, the beginners are always much louder.
Oh, yeah. saw that
I
one
wasn't
too.
sure what she meant by the beginners.
Right, I'm not sure beginners was the word,
Yeah.
but I don't know what the word was.
Yeah. Do we leave it
What's the
as,
sentence before it?
the sentence for it, so it's Julie said the other thing is that they have heard more from people who don't want to be in it than they have from people who want to be in it. Pam said you always get that, the beginners are always much louder.
Oh, she must mean the people that speak first on a topic.
Oh,
But I don't know that it's,
that, maybe not that relevant.
I mean, I don't know that that's important to the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, I don't know if we
Just
change,
strike it.
strike the sentence.
Is that all the sentence said?
Mhm.
Pam always said you get that.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
sentence after.
So just strike, the beginners are always much louder. Just strike that sentence. Yeah, I would agree with that. Page 4. Second paragraph, or I don't know, yeah, second paragraph, John said, there was something about, John said if Janelle's house was on the National Register, we could tear it down.
I think that third sentence was the one, I saw that too, I couldn't quite grasp what it was.
All of these
trying to
can
say.
and cannot do things that she and Joel have been clearly of, most of them should go away. So something about that sentence doesn't make sense or flow. Do you recall that, John?
What's the subject of it?
He and Janelle were having a conversation about the neighborhood heritage area. And it was just part of that exchange. I think, John, you were making
Yeah.
a point about demolition in the air, in the,
Yeah, if the building is on the National Register, it's not protected from demolition.
It was that simple. I remember.
so how do we amend that?
That's okay, I don't have my glasses.
Those are, oh,
I thought I had them on here.
How would you want to amend that, John?
I'm trying to think of how you would amend it.
What page was that on?
Page 4.
I guess what I was saying is that
Is that word clearly should have been leery? Would that make things make more sense?
Yeah.
Maybe
All
that's
of these
just the
can
one
and
word
cannot
that's
do.
not right.
Yeah, here's,
It should just be leery instead of clearly.
Yeah. Leery.
Does that sound right?
that
was
would,
not
that
here.
would fit in with, therefore most of it would
yeah,
go away.
Yeah, that's an idea of what word would fit there.
Sounds good. Same page. Where is that? So down near the bottom, second from the bottom paragraph, John said that they should take it away. I believe here, Jay asked, I think here I was wanting clarification. Jay asked, are you talking about definitions and details in the manual? We can cross out weeds. And John said yes.
yeah.
I also brought up weeds later on, which I think is page 5. And I didn't make note where that was, other than it was on page 5.
Oh, you're looking for the word weeds?
Yeah, okay,
So,
here it is.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph up from the bottom.
Yeah. Jay said the actions on this are to define it and keep the area as originally defined and move forward with the concept of this draft of defining demolition. I think period. Just get rid of the weeds.
Yeah.
That slang of referring to details and
Yes.
things that aren't germane to what we're trying to accomplish. That's all I have.
I found things I didn't and things that I saw. So, I'll move to approve the minutes of September 21st as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Oh, yeah, you're abstained, yes, thank you. 4 abstains. Let's just, I want to talk about updates on recent demolition applications before we get into the discussion of the proposed neighborhood heritage area. A couple of scheduling things. First, related to 7 Wadley. We had a public hearing that we didn't reach a quorum. We had one person from the public connected via Zoom. And I didn't make any decision yet. I've met with Doug just to make sure procedurally whether it was worth rescheduling or moving forward, letting the property owner know that they can move forward. In review of the zoning ordinance and the language of that, it really doesn't meet the definition of what we're, in terms of language relative to historic and having a nature and character of the neighborhood. I didn't bring that language with me tonight. I meant to.
I have it.
That's awesome. So I forget what page there.
Is it under, it's not
What's-
procedure or,
I think it's like section 5 or something.
well, it's section 5.
Yeah.
We have several subsections to it. Let's see, this is definitions.
So that brings also, while Julie's finding that, the timeline. So I learned in the details that the 30-day clock starts with the submission of the DRC, the DRC's
Request, yeah.
letter, which, and not from the submission of the application of the demolition,
Right.
whatever, application. So it's technically, we have until, I think, the 22nd. We have until the end of the week. So I wanted to bring this to the committee to decide, do we try to make a schedule for a second public hearing and do so by the end of the week? Or, and also, I guess the question is really meeting the definition of what we can ask for a public hearing for? Or do we vote that they can proceed with the demolition?
Well, I wasn't at the demolition subcommittee, so I'll talk about well, I'm not sure I can talk about what happened there as far as the procedure goes, but I can interpret the zoning ordinance if you like. So the findings that you have to go through when considering that the building, you would like to preserve the building. We've asked these questions at previous demolition reviews. National, state, or local criteria for the designation of a historic, cultural, or architectural landmark, and I think, and I'm going to use the other Wadley Street one as an example, because we had that as a public hearing, that we did make the finding that it's cultural landmark to that neighborhood was really the most important part that we found, along with we disagreed that it couldn't be saved. Yeah, I mean, retention of the building or structure would help preserve and protect a historic place or area of historic interest in the town. And so that was a finding too. That was one of the first things we said, is that building. And so I don't know about what happened on 7 Wadley Street, but if we go ahead for the public meeting, that's the kind of language that we need to use in making our decision. And we did for the 10 Wadley Street. It's really quite broad, but we did the appropriate action for that property.
Well, I mean, Bill, John, and I did the review, and we did struggle with a decision to hold the public hearing. Just the fact it was the 1950s structure, wasn't included in the neighborhood heritage area, but it contributed to it. It was a solid structure. I'm just out of opinion. It isn't anything about in that language about whether or not we feel it's a solid structure. So, it was sort of a gray area, I believe, and thought the best interest was to be transparent about any decision and moving forward and to hold a public meeting.
Well,
So,
I would like to hear, well, do you have to make a decision? No, the subcommittee can make its own decision about whether or not to hold a public meeting. For me, as I wasn't at the demolition review, so I would like to hear what you all had to say about it, whether it's just in this meeting or in a public hearing. And if the decision of the subcommittee was to hold a
Part
public
of it,
hearing.
we wanted the public to be part of the process.
Mhm.
That was really the governing factor there. I mean, whether the building is overly historic or not, there wasn't that much of a feeling of that amongst us there. That historically, it by itself was not a gem of a building.
Mhm.
But this whole process about tearing down existing neighborhoods, that this was contributing to it, even though it wasn't indicated in the survey. We felt that it was contributing. We felt that we would want the public to be part of the process. So they understood what we were trying to do.
Mhm.
Weren't we trying to also say that it doesn't have to be a 1790s house to
Right.
be
No,
qualified? This representative, kind of a typical house of the 1940s or 50s, that would be,
over 50 years.
yeah.
and that's the part of the language of the zoning ordinance, is that it does trigger us if it is older than 50 years.
Mhm.
But in terms of the language, we still have to make a distinction of, historic in nature, or something about the architecture is
Contributing.
unique. That's where I think we were in that sort of gray area, and decided to be on the side of transparency and invite the public to that meeting. So we are at a point where we did schedule it, it was announced, it was publicized. We had one person from the public, and as a telltale, it didn't rise to the level of interest that 10 Wadley did.
But if we do anything, it has to be either tomorrow night or the next night?
Yes, we're
Can't
on.
be tomorrow
Can't be
night.
tomorrow night, because it's
We
not
haven't got
24
time
hours.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be Thursday night?
There's an HDC meeting Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, I think given the timeline, it's probably not realistic to reschedule for Thursday night.
I'll be out of town
It's just
myself.
unfortunate, but I do like, John, that perspective of continuing forward to a public hearing, because
Mhm.
I think so often people don't know what goes into a decision about to demolish a house or not. So it's best to have those conversations in public, I feel.
Well, particularly that this neighborhood has been surveyed and it was already targeted as important. And the fact that this building is probably one of the newer ones in there, it's still,
That's a matter.
yeah.
Yeah, shows transition, I think.
Yeah, there are other places around town that everybody thinks of as not historic because the buildings are new, even though they might be 60 years old. And this is an example
Right.
of a place where if more people know what we do here, that they'll have the knowledge to change their, make a decision maybe differently. Because they think that it's useless and it can be torn away because nobody's going to notice the difference.
Well, I think it would be nice to do it, but we can't. Unless people want to do it Thursday night.
Can I ask,
That's a little tight.
can I ask what was the opinion of the demolition subcommittee on the 31 High Street, 35?
8 Gilman.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to talk about that next.
but if that's going to be a public hearing, that might just serve a purpose for us. It's not the same as those buildings are quite older, but At least it would show the process.
Yeah, I mean, the plan is to have a public hearing for that property.
Which one, 35?
The 8 Gilman or 35
Yeah,
High,
right.
whatever that is.
Yeah,
So,
that's a more complex thing, because
Yeah.
two buildings, they're willing to do something with one of them, and that, at least I think, would work.
We don't have to talk
Not
about it
sure
yet.
about that. Hmm?
So you don't have to talk about your decision yet.
But should we put forward a motion on what to do with this?
Yeah,
Move not to try to reschedule the public hearing due to lack of time.
I guess that would be the motion.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that just, there was a lack of public interest at the first scheduled.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. All right, so the second demolition is the 8 Gilman, 35 High. And,
When you refer to 8 Gilman, are you referring to the building that's behind the High Street building?
I think they had it as 8 Gilman, but,
Yeah, it
It's the one
was,
that sits back.
it was renumbered.
Yeah.
sits off the
How much
road.
time do we have on that one?
So, good question.
When did the
We
demo
did
review-
have it scheduled for November 1st,
Oh, yeah. that's
and we
right.
got bumped
You got bumped by the select board.
by the select board. So we
I thought we-
are in need of a reschedule in
When
our,
when was the demo review?
the demo review, I have to go back to my emails. It was a Friday. I think it was Friday the 8th. That was before the long weekend, right, Indigenous.
Yeah.
So that was the 11th. I filed the letter on the 12th, Tuesday,
Okay.
so we're 7 days off of that. And, oh, the other thing is it's working days, not calendar days.
Right.
Oh,
So,
We saved ourselves, we changed that a number of years ago because the 30 work calendar days was a real problem,
yeah,
and getting people active on weekends and, you know.
yeah, so that was the other point of clarification with what came up with the 7 Wadley was it was working days.
Yeah,
well,
business days.
if we got bumped from the first,
So
would the second or third work for people?
well, let me see, I have the email of choices Barb sent me. Give me a second to pull that back up. That's what I had up here. So we have, so John, you're out of town next week, right?
Yes, I
So-
won't be back until, well, I'm traveling the 1st, but I won't be back until probably 8 o'clock at night.
Okay, so you would have missed the first anyway. So our choices are Monday the 8th, Wednesday the 17th. There are Fridays available, the 12th and the 19th.
Let's shoot for the Monday, just to give us more time for, within the 30-day period.
And there's no select board meeting. that week.
And Monday nights, people are used to seeing something meeting, so.
Which Monday?
Monday the 8th
Monday the 8th?
at 7.
Let me just make sure, we changed our select board schedule, so.
It better not get too close to Thanksgiving.
Well, that was the one thing, the historic, this is gonna trigger the historic district commission as well. So the PEA folks wanted to make sure that they had some lead time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so the
This-
HDC doesn't meet until the November 18th.
So that still gives them the lead time
Yeah.
based on that public hearing. All right.
And they were very appreciative of getting the letter the last time we made a recommendation for something in the historic district.
Does that come from, Barb have forwarded that on, or do I do that directly to?
Because she must have done it, because I think, did you ask her to?
I didn't, I mean, I went.
It was in the file with the project. So.
Oh, okay, good.
But we should make sure we say that in your message to her. Please
Okay,
distribute.
yeah.
The 8th. Yeah, no, we're okay on the 8th.
All right.
So we're shooting for the 8th?
Yeah, so those are the choices Barb gave us. I'll email her and let her know we're interested in that, and then let her communicate with
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
PEA group. I don't know if she'll need to follow with HDC again as well, but probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And this brings up part of the process you were talking about, the 30 days.
Yeah.
This is something that we haven't taken advantage of in the past, and PEA would be a good first really drive at it, I guess, is working with the applicant to find a different solution. Usually we just make a finding and say, this is it, and either go ahead, or this is it, we want a public hearing, and don't talk to them in between. So I don't know how effective it is to actually work with an applicant to find a different solution, but, it's in our purview to do so.
Is that something you do before the meeting, or?
Within the
suggest
30
that-
days, so it could be after the meeting even, and because we're advisory,
Because sometimes we throw out an idea or something, or at least the HDC did that.
Yeah, but I think it should be a more formal thing,
Yeah?
so it's documented.
And certainly they'd be, I'm pretty sure they'd be willing to sit and talk about it.
Yeah, that's why I said it would be a good
Yeah.
choice for a project to
You're right.
really do that full out, rather than just as a, well, you could keep it kind of situation.
And I appreciate hearing that. I've thought about this as well, is that I don't feel that I'm informed enough to know what it is I can advise them to do. Salvage, move a property, do we have a library or a reference list of, I say library, or do we have a list of information, contact people who are more expert in those things? Then
Yes, well, not a formal written list, but one of the things that we don't have is the authority to have a third-party inspection. Like the planning board does that, they'll get a third-party engineer to look at the site plan or the subdivision or something like that, but we don't have the authority to get someone unless we want to pay for them out of our fund. So there's that. So we can ask people to volunteer, but the only ones I know live out of town, so.
yeah, I just remember when that Water Street property being a Swayze, and the conversation was, well, can we do something different, or we'd like you to do something different, but we didn't really have anything for them to, any resource for them to draw from. It was just a request, and the rebuttal was, well, we're going to salvage the material and use it in the construction. Well, okay, but we have no way of knowing if they did. Could that property have been torn down and moved to a new location and reassembled? There would have been a wonderful alternative, but I think we talked about that with them as well. It costs some money to do that. I don't know if anybody. So I guess to go on to what you said, Julie, is for us to take that next step, it would be good to have a resource to share rather than just a request.
Yeah, I can double check that, but I did ask the town planner the question for both the Heritage Commission and the HDC about getting a third-party opinion. And I looked up the RSAs, and quite frankly, It's something as a legislator I have to work on because they're kind of vague in there. But it didn't say anything about, like it does with the planning board. It definitely says planning board may hire a third-party consultant for review of whatever they want. So basically, we rely on this commission and its membership, and John has an architectural background, I do too, but you can't always rely on that, you know, being maintained on this commission as people come and go.
Oh, sure.
And we do try as a select board to select people with kind of background, but attracting people is part of the aspect too. And it's one of the reasons why we need to be more public and have the more public hearings, is so that people can see the kind of expertise we really want to have on hand. Because if somebody sees conversation drifting one way, they, you know, if it's someone that has a background in design or demolition or whatever, they might want to volunteer to get their opinion more involved.
Just a general question, or question is a statement. We were involved with the HGC directly on a couple other projects.
Mm-hmm.
I see one of the issues here is that the HGC, regardless what our recommendation is, the HGC is going to need to know what's going back there.
The HDC does, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And does that involve the planning board?
Depends on the project. If it requires a site plan review, which I think that this PEA's project probably does because of the extent of what they're doing. If it doesn't, then it's just the code enforcement officer that makes the decision. So that's also part of the problem. We have advice, but we can only go to whoever makes the final decision. And I really don't know, the code enforcement officer should actually be at one of our meetings so we can have that discussion and talk about
I would
interaction.
assume that PEA has already made the application to the HGC.
No, it's not on this month's agenda. And that's this Thursday. So that's why it probably wouldn't be. So it'll be next month.
Probably waiting to see if we get how they do with us.
Yeah.
But, well, maybe I'm not quite there yet, but if we held a meeting, a demolition meeting, and listened to formally listened to what they want to do, as opposed to picking and when we were out with them, listening. And even with some public input, we might get then afterwards, if something might come out of that meeting that would be a good suggestion. We could say, could we sit down with you? And
Yeah, absolutely. We have the 30 days after we make the notification to the code enforcement officer whether we've made the decision or we want to go ahead with a public hearing. And we have 30 days to work with the owner. So if we have a public hearing during that time, even after the public hearing, someone can come forward and either come to us directly or to the applicant directly and say, why don't you consider these things?
no. I got the feeling they have their ideas. I mean, they've really done some
Oh, I'm sure they
research
have,
on this,
yeah.
but they're not unopposed to listening either. I mean,
December 2nd would be the date with which 30 days would be up.
And so the earlier we start in this, as long as we feel prepared, is better.
yeah,
Because then we still do have time, depending on what our finding is. If we find, as a whole committee, that, you know, maybe Maura and I, who weren't there, and Pam, and John, might have a different opinion depending on what is said by the subcommittee.
We have the opportunity to go back.
Yeah.
I asked them there, they said, whatever you want to do. And they drove their point home by taking us inside the building. Um,
Yeah, I'll tell you that
And John and Pam were both there as well. So it was Bill, John, myself, Pam, and John Bruder.
Yeah, that's one thing that's kind of vague in the procedures, is that it's really supposed to be a subcommittee. And the subcommittee makes the decision of whether to go forward or not. It doesn't come back to the whole body for that kind of vote. But having the whole commission out there, even the subcommittee has to have a public notice. So that we're not missing anything there,
Right.
we've been doing that. I just am questioning, I'm just gonna throw it out there, it doesn't say anything in the ordinance or in the RSA's about whether the whole body as a commission should or can go out to review a building, and I just wanted to put it out there. That's partly why I haven't been to the last couple of demolition reviews, is because I think the decision's being taken care of by at least the first 3 people that sign up. And that's what the subcommittee is, 3
Is that
or
in
less.
the RSA, that there should be a subcommittee? We're not a very big committee.
It does say subcommittee, but yeah, it begs the
There aren't too many
question.
people left, you know.
Do we have enough people to form a subcommittee dependent? And
It
be-
depends on each project, because they are scheduled whenever.
Yeah, it's really availability, like Bill was saying.
And we might find, so that's why I haven't gone, is because I want to hear the opinion of the subcommittee and make my own decision based on what I know of the building, not having done the tour. And so elucidate, I think, the conversation of why the decision was made either way, which way it is. I guess what I'm questioning is just whether it becomes a site walk for the whole committee, for the whole commission, or, which is fine, those are also noticed, but site walks you don't usually make a decision on. It's just an informational, investigational kind of activity. So I'm just hesitant to have everybody out there just for that purpose, because that would turn it into a site walk, because we've identified or defined subcommittee. If we hadn't, it could be all of us, no problem, but a subcommittee of 3 or more, or 3 or less, I'm sorry, 3 or 2.
Does it say 3 or 2?
Well, it says 3, but 2 is a quorum.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
So I'm just, it's like a rock and a hard place, where 3 people will have the responsibility to make that decision, but the whole body will decide if they agree or disagree within that 30 days. We usually have a meeting somewhere.
but if the subcommittee goes out, 3 people go out and they come back with a recommendation that it should be torn down, and they bring that to the committee,
They don't.
what,
They don't, they tell the.
that's it, huh?
Yeah, they tell the
I
code
know.
enforcement officer, planning board, or whoever, that, whatever the opinion is, to have a public hearing or to let it go. And typically within the 30 days, and I think that's why we did the 30 business days as opposed to calendar days, is that we would be able to have a commission meeting
Yeah,
all together.
see, I think the commission should be able to work with some of them are easy. We had just had one that I think is
Yeah.
gonna be easy.
Yeah,
Spruce.
But there's
Spruce
others like this one, which I think the whole commission should be involved, or would wanna be involved. Or all the ones that are who would like to be involved should be able to be,
And so here we are, after the subcommittee has reviewed it and made a recommendation for a public hearing, you're telling me, as part of the whole commission, that this is how you want to proceed.
Okay.
And then we'll have the public hearing in which all of us will then be there.
But then, I don't see, if I'm not in the subcommittee, how do I get my information at the public hearing?
You get whatever information our chairman provides to the code enforcement officer when we make the decision to proceed or
I like hands-on stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, Bill. It does feel challenging that, you know, the commission subcommittee could make a recommendation to demolish something without the rest of us necessarily having an opportunity to weigh in, unless we have a default that the answer is public hearing only, you know, I mean, no matter what, kind of move to public hearing so that everybody can be involved. But even then, you don't all get to be on the property.
Well, that's why we have the
necessarily.
30 days, because let's say somebody came in, they give, they make their application for, you know, we want to tear down this building. The code enforcement officer has 3 days, 2 days to tell us. We have 7 days to visit and make a determination. And then we have 30 days, and we have 30 business days to go forward with a decision either as a whole or by the subcommittee to have a public hearing. We are likely to have a meeting within that 30 days. And also within that 30 days, either the subcommittee or appointees by the subcommittee can have a different subcommittee to work with the owner for a different solution. So I feel comfortable that we can do it that way. I think that's how it's going to proceed. And so, to your point, if the subcommittee says, no, this is not a historical contributing resource to the town, and other members of the commission might disagree, that we'll have a public hearing before our final decision is made.
Well,
Or a public meeting, anyway.
that final decision will be a product of that public meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's the way it should be.
yeah, and then, like, if, so let's say the process begins like the day after today. Somebody comes in with a request for demolition, then code enforcement officer has 2 days to tell us. We have so many days to look at it, or tell him we're going to look at it and make a decision of demolition or public hearing, tell the code enforcement officer, and that's when the 30 days kicks in. And within that time, we can, I guess I would leave it up to the subcommittee to gather the information they want to, you know, what the Historical Society has.
Yeah, that's what that time period is
For.
necessary for, yeah.
And then, and also to ask the owner, would you please consider some alternatives that we think may have, and that's where we get into the, I wish we could do a consultant that we don't have the authority to ask for yet.
Can that subcommittee change? I'm thinking of from time to time. Jay usually sends out something, he says, we're gonna have we have a demolition at, you know, 111 High Street, who can make it? And so
Yeah.
one day there's 3 people, and then the next it's at your house, and we have 3 other people. And if we had a subcommittee of 3 that was permanent, it would be very hard to always.
We can't make it permanent
We
because.
can't do it. It's just impossible. There's not enough time for everybody, you know, for 3 people to be there all the time.
Yeah.
So when Barb sends out the notice that there's a request for a demolition review, the first 3 people that respond to Jay, let's say I'm available, or if Jay throws out dates as chairman.
So the committee could be different each
Yeah.
time. That's what I was after.
Yeah, it just has to be-
Maybe very clear, but
Yeah.
that's what I was asking.
Yeah, so it's not a standing subcommittee.
No.
It's a subcommittee
Right.
of any 3 who happen to be available.
And because we have that 30-day limitation, it's impossible for the same 3 people to meet within it and still let us have the opportunities that we have.
If the subcommittee comes back and recommends that we have a public hearing, because they don't think it should be torn down, and Jay sets up a meeting, does the rest of us have a chance to go see the house or building, whatever it is?
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I
Individually?
would hate to vote just on somebody coming in and saying, well, you know, that fireplace is just beautiful and we want to save that.
That's a good question. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't see why not. If it's just like 1 person at a time, or less than a quorum of the board, so less than 4. And I mean the commission as a whole, not the subcommittee. or one person from the subcommittee, you might want to see it again. That's within, I think, within the 30 days of working with the applicant to see if there's a different solution, so, yeah, or we can have a noticed site walk. You know,
That would
if
be-
the other,
okay.
if the remainder of the board wants to have the opportunity. So
Okay.
there are those things, and there was one other point that I had.
So we'll try and do it with the right way, with this 35 High Street. and
Yeah.
eight. Okay.
Let me ask this question in terms of a scenario for clarity, and I'll use 7 Wadley. What if the DRC said that it's okay to demolish that?
Well,
So, and then the letter gets sent to Doug and the building goes down. If there are others on the commission that were like, well, I disagree with that,
here's the thing.
I would have liked to had a voice on it.
Here's the thing about that. When a decision such as that is made, the subcommittee says, go ahead and we have no problem with the demolition of this building. The owner is taking a risk. If they go in and demolish it the next day, they have a risk because we have this 30-day time period. If they do the work before that 30 days is over, we can still object.
The house is
Does that
still
make
gone.
sense?
But the guy, yeah, I mean,
Well, I know,
so
but-
what's the purpose
It
then?
doesn't change anything at that point.
Well, it's a, again,
know.
we have, we're advisory only, so it's not a big risk, but it can be bad press. It can, put a bad twist on why things, or a good twist on why things shouldn't be demolished, or a bad view of this policy, and we need to change it within the state RSAs. And I do have a question put out to the Division of Historical Resources, just because of this conversation I knew we were going to have tonight, about the regulatory authority we have for, because my interpretation is that we have no authority to do any kind of fining or anything if the property's taken within this time period that we have. I think we don't, but I just want to be clear with the people that work with this all the time.
So I guess if I can kind of sum up, it's sounding to me like we would, as a commission, like to have input into as many demolitions as possible and not leave it to just the subcommittee. So maybe we sort of decide that, when in doubt, it goes to public hearing.
That's.
That way, we have a fair opportunity
That's
to
good.
sort of assess the property as a whole, rather than being limited to whoever happens to be available on that given
Yeah,
walkthrough day.
if there's any doubt at all, you have a meeting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that public hearing doesn't have to be a special day, it can be, it's more likely than not to fall within the 30 business days of the time period we have to deal with demolitions. So we don't have to have a special hearing on a special night when the room's available or what have you. We can just do it at a regular business meeting, as long as we do a public notice as opposed to just a public notice. So I think we do, but we get both approaches done.
Mhm.
And then if
Makes sense.
somebody an individual wants to do a site evaluation themselves, then they can reach out to the property owner.
Good, okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, worth a try.
Well, I think this one is a good opportunity of working with the property owner in some way. So we have time between now and November, well, even after December 2nd. We have the time between now and December 2nd to work with them in some manner of either, I don't know that we can talk about their solution, what they're going to do in place, but have you thought of doing X, Y, Z, or does it, I really, I have been told, I have a chance in November to put in some legislation that maybe we can get this changed so that the, both the Historic District Commission and the Heritage Commission have the authority to hire a third-party consultant for third-party interpretation, because we've gone through asking the owner to show us why, on other properties, on why the cost is too heavy to repair instead of replace. And that's their opinion, and they get it from who they choose, and who they choose is going to give them the opinion that they want. So it would be great if we could also have our own opinion disembodied from the group that has to make the final decision. So I promise you this. I will take a shot at it. I have a couple of legislators who may be interested in co-sponsoring. I don't think it's not a property taking issue, which is always very, causes diversity, or not diversity, but.
Although the others start pulling it up there, they might even notice it.
Well, if it even gets to the front desk, who knows? But yeah, and I thank you for having this discussion to remind me to do it.
Good. In the beginning, when we first had the demolition ordinance put in place, not everybody knew what to do. So it was good to have 5 people show up, so they understood.
To learn it.
To learn it,
Mm-hmm.
understood the process.
And there's nothing holding us back from that. It just, I was starting to feel awkward because it was becoming more of a site walk as opposed to a demolition review committee. And that I just needed to clarify that in my head, that we could post it as both. The public's invited to join regardless.
Right.
It's a public meeting. The only difference is who makes the final vote at that, after the site walk. And that would be just the subcommittee that's been chosen. Are we clearer?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right, so let's discuss the status of the proposed neighborhood heritage area. We spent quite a bit of time last meeting. Review of the minutes demonstrated that that discussion. We had some public input, which was beneficial for us. Seemed like we were at a point of deciding one, how to proceed, and 2, by proceeding, what does that actually mean? I think we were zeroing in on demolition, which is segued from a previous conversation.
Yeah, it does, because one of the things about the demolition review is that we don't have to do any kind of abutters notice, and that is a burden on the owner to have to wait for however many days it takes to notify the abutters. It squishes into our time frame. One of the things when we put in the demolition review aspect, we looked at other cities and towns that had done the same thing and decided to be really conservative and chop it down to 30 days because it wasn't going to fly if we were going to take tell somebody you can't do anything on your property for 90 days, which is what it is in Concord. So we chose the 30-day alternative, and it's worked. But I think if we're getting to be more formal and thorough, I think it should still work fine. So, but what we have is that the notification, and this is part of the communication committee's purview or mission, is to get the notice out there to neighbors in the neighborhood that this house is proposed to be gone, or this building is proposed to be gone. So now I forgot what you said.
Well, I think we were
that
settling in on a couple of decisions, so we had quite a discussion last.
Right, so with the heritage area, the way that we can write that is that the neighbors must be notified. I think we have that authority in there. It's perhaps a question for the Division of Historical Resources, but
Yeah, I think that would be a good question to ask them. I mean, I know that some of the, just to kind of sum up the process, when we met as a sort of ad hoc group to survey people using the DHR sort of proposed ideas about what could be regulated, the goal was to see kind of what interest there was, if any, in any number of options for changes to buildings, demolition of buildings. And so in the end, after surveying, it came down to, a section of the neighborhood seemed interested in saying that there should be regulations around building demolition. And so I think another one of the major issues that came up was wanting to make sure that the review board, or the Heritage Area Advisory Board that administers this, would be made up strictly from people who live within the neighborhood and within the heritage area. And I think, based on my reading of the DHR handbook, that is something that we can ask for from the planning board. I think the planning board makes the ultimate decision,
yes.
but I think that we can certainly ask for that and say, here is the
Yeah,
reason why.
that's absolutely in there. They want
Yeah.
neighborhood participation, but it does extend to having professionals like an architect or planner or somebody to also be on that neighborhood board, advisory board, which is important, I think, because of the questions that we've had here. Is I'm not a specialist, and I may not know that beam is something that is critical to either the structure or shows how the building was constructed, that kind of thing. So that's a consideration when you're talking to the group that might want to go forward with this. Having it just be the neighborhood may cover that. You never know who's moving in and out, right?
Well, I think we also talked about the fact, though, that the advisory committee could call in experts to ask questions of. I feel like I remember that coming up at one of our meetings when we discussed this as a concept. And that would be a way to get that kind of professional lens if members of the neighborhood didn't have it.
Yeah, if that's in there, I would recommend going that way to the planning board.
Who would pay for that?
That's the question, I guess.
Yeah, I know. The advisory committee itself is all volunteers.
Mhm.
Right.
Let's see, I wonder if that would fall under the planning board's consultation aspect.
I think
This is-
it would make sense if it could, because this would be an arm of the planning board
That's what I was
once
gonna
it's
say.
established. So it would
Write that
seem,
down.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, at least that committee could ask the planning board if we could, because they would be able to hire somebody and pay for it.
Yeah.
So I think the question is, do we move forward with presenting something to the planning board? And I know there was a long discussion about that last time. So having read it over, it didn't seem like there was a clear feeling one way or the other, or I couldn't quite tell whether
Yeah,
there was
there-
a clear feeling one way or the other.
There wasn't a decision on that, no.
But the direction was going towards, as Jay was using the words, cut out the weeds,
Mhm.
or get out of the weeds and just get straight to the issue that has come forward as a very important aspect to the
Mhm.
neighborhood, and to preserve it through notice
Mhm.
of demolition.
But are we going to the planning board, or is this committee going to the planning board?
Well,
Or both.
so just to clarify, the committee that we met in the spring to develop the survey, my understanding was that our responsibility was to develop and administer a survey and bring the results back to the full commission. So having completed that, my understanding was that sort of ad hoc committee's job was done, and that we would then decide sort of where to move and who to have involved at the next phase.
So would it be, so then, to your question, would it be the Heritage Commission that's going to go to the planning board and recommend they adopt the neighborhood area what are we calling it? I'm still using the wrong word.
Heritage area.
Neighborhood heritage area. And we have to explain the process because we as a commission are going to be the.
But I think we have to have at least the people there.
Oh, yeah.
We could present it, but at least a group of 2 or 3 people that might say, well, yeah, they would take the responsibility of heading up this group if it was formed
Mhm.
Yeah,
and have them come.
because that will act independently of this commission.
Right.
They can, be a bunch of neighbors having cookouts and whatnot, but when somebody proposes demolition in their, in their neighborhood heritage area, then they become activated.
Mhm. Right, so it wouldn't be like a commission that would have to meet on a regular basis, right? It would only
Right.
meet when
When
activated,
the matter
basically.
came up, yeah.
Who would draw up the proposal? Us?
I think,
I'll have to look at back
Yeah.
at the,
I think we can, and I'm sure it would then need to be presented to, the segment of,
I
the-
think it
the
would have a
neighborhood
little
we're
bit more
talking about.
authority if the Heritage Commission brought it to the
Okay,
planning board.
but I'd like input from the group if there seems to be 2 or 3 leaders that might,
Yeah,
would you take the responsibility of getting something together and then we would go to the planning board?
yeah, I think I can do that. I mean, the planning board's meetings are booked out for a while, so hopefully that gives me a little wiggle room
Yeah.
to pull together.
yeah, probably
We're
till
using-
January at least.
Yeah,
Planning a month or 2 ahead.
yeah.
And is that as it was originally proposed?
Well, I think that's the big question. I see John's point, having read the minutes, about wanting to keep it to the original area of the survey. I just feel like, I'm not sure that that full section that includes Green and Cass is going to end up getting the support that we need. Whereas I do feel like when we surveyed the Oak Forest Park section, based on my tallies, about 75% of the respondents in that area were in favor of some regulation around demolition. So that to me felt like a pretty strong yes.
Yeah.
Whereas we didn't get that kind of yes from sort of the other half of the original survey area. So I felt kind of conflicted about moving forward with the full district as a result.
Yeah.
Knowing that kind of down the line, could we propose a second area? Could we propose to expand it, given, if people were in favor of it down the line? I do think we have some flexibility, but it would be nice to start with an area where people seemed more strongly in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth reaching out, because a chunk of the area was not interested in being part of a more restrictive.
Well, that's actually not the case. So when I sent this out in June and July, it was literally, as was read to you all the last couple of months, strictly about demolition.
Yeah.
And the responses we got were, no, thank you. So I think I'm just going to have to take that as,
No, thank you.
no, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
We have,
Members of
Can I
the
ask a
public?
question?
Yes.
I live at 31 Park Street. So I think one issue that,
Just your name for the
oh,
minutes. too.
Jackie Raquel.
Jackie Raquel.
I think an issue that needs to be explained to people, and I don't know if you're planning on having another public Zoom session like you did way back in November, February, I think it was. So if you go ahead and you create this heritage area and you have one rule, which is, you can't demolish anything without having it approved. What is sort of the legislative process to add another rule that says you need to paint your door purple? Or a legislative process that says you can't demolish your property or a piece of your property if you do it on Sunday? So basically, defeating the whole point of it.
Right.
This group is not going to be there forever. So I think people need to understand and be comfortable with
How
what
permanent
happens
business.
to this area after you've created it with whatever rules you created it with? Is that the only rule that can ever be there? You have to create a whole new heritage area if you want to add a second rule? How does that work? And, you know, without that being answered, I think you're going to continue to have a huge amount of opposition.
That's a good point. Because the heritage neighborhood area falls under the jurisdiction of the planning board, whatever my interpretation is whatever this, if it's an advisory, no, it's not advisory, the heritage neighborhood committee.
Association.
Yeah, would have to come to the planning board to amend whatever it is their scope of decision-making.
And the planning board would be able to approve it? Or
Mhm.
But I think, to that point, the planning board would be doing that in public session, where anybody would be able to attend, would be able to comment, and the planning board would hopefully take those comments into consideration.
Like with just with the neighborhood group, it would just be that, you know, and however you decide to notice, however that group decides to notice the neighborhood that something is occurring, that falls under the purview that they've established. I'm gonna keep losing my train of thought, but going through the planning board gives more information to more people.
Thank you.
I think that's one of the reasons that they put it under the planning board too, is not just to have that cover of, or the umbrella of listening to a neighborhood directly, or representation of a larger scope of the neighborhood, with, yeah, I mean, the group is approved by the neighborhoods and the planning board. So the umbrella gives people a public opportunity. And I think the Neighborhood Advisory Committee also has to post their meetings somewhere, do they not?
I don't know for sure, but I would assume so, because it would be an arm of the planning board. So as an
Yeah.
official body of the planning board, I think they have to follow the same rules.
And the other thing too is the planning board meets twice a month. So that has a little bit more flexibility and or opportunity to continue something, a discussion to another meeting.
Jackie, does that response still feel like there's a level of apprehension to?
For me personally, yes. I think other people might feel better about it with that answer, but for me, I still don't want my house in this area.
Mhm.
So are we at the point where we are asking to get on the planning board's agenda to ask them to consider this?
I think we have to have something written
Okay,
that is.
so have something written that we can discuss as a commission first, and then it
Yeah.
has to be on their agenda?
Probably, that for our next meeting, we should have something that we can, so that,
So this is going to be a totally new concept to the planning board, and they're gonna take some time to understand it, and it's not gonna be, you know, one meeting. It's gonna take a few meetings, and it's not gonna be the most important thing on their agenda, so.
Well, and we won't even be able to get on their agenda, like you said, till maybe the new year, so
Yeah.
that means we have a couple more of our meetings to kind of refine our ideas, get things the way we want them.
It would be good to get John Gruder's input on this,
Yeah.
being the planning board rep for us.
Mhm.
So-
yeah, that's a good idea.
So I don't know if he has a conflict with this day and time, to the third Tuesday, but I'll find out, and I'll try to make sure he's available by schedule.
And
For the
if
next
it's
discussion.
if it's a matter of not being available on the night because of something, you know, other than a planning board meeting, which those happen on Thursday, he can participate electronically. One person from each commission can participate electronically. If we make a vote, it has to be a roll call vote, but they, you know, we can do it by Zoom, they could do it by telephone. They just have to be able to be heard. So if it's a if it's a logistical problem of getting here on a Tuesday, you can offer him that.
Yeah. I can't remember if he said he had an issue with this dare time or not.
Are we moving our meetings to the evening then, or was it just this one?
I think the evening works best for me. It seemed like maybe others.
That's
And
good.
there were some complications in going hybrid, in person. It just got to be a little chaotic. And so I've settled in on this,
That's good.
And I think
if that works for others.
daytime was working okay for most of us when we might have been working remotely and
Yeah.
been at home and able to jump on a meeting for an hour, but
Yeah,
now
it's a
that's not
trade-off.
as much the case, so.
So yeah, I have a plan for us to be back on what we were pre-pandemic on
That's fine.
a third Tuesday at 7. And if there is something that we can get John Gruder on to help us with some planning board insight and forecasting, then we can work around that.
Is the zoning board having a special meeting, or have they changed their?
This is their
schedule?
night, I
This
think.
is their usual night, because we might want to reconsider. I think we were
Yeah,
on second
that's it.
Tuesday before.
Yeah, maybe we
wasn't it?
should think about second Tuesdays.
Oh, it wasn't third Tuesday?
It might have been.
Second Tuesdays is conservation.
Oh, yeah, that's
Okay,
conservation.
I know there, I had.
Yeah, I
some-
thought we were always third Tuesday.
Maybe, I can't remember.
Yeah, occasionally something comes up in the,
When I say I was,
ZBA,
I've
yeah.
been doing this for a couple of years, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, I know, we got wiped out by a year and a half,
Yeah.
doing it totally differently.
I thought we were switching to Wednesday.
Well, I saw that in the minutes, and I apologize, because
Yeah.
that was something we proposed. And so this was already on the calendar by the time I went to do some scheduling. And so, I mean, published on our webpage
Yeah.
calendar. So,
So we can consider Wednesdays?
we can consider Wednesdays, yeah. And I-
They're typically less meetings in town on Wednesdays than any other, Wednesdays and Fridays, but the ones meeting.
All right, well, I will, if,
yeah. Yeah, Wednesdays are generally more open for some reason.
Yeah,
all right, so
so maybe that's a better night.
the
to
third
plan on.
Wednesday of the
Okay.
month. I got 2 emails to Barb.
Okay.
All right. We don't have Pam here for historic HDC stuff, but I think we've covered some territory there. Planning Commission without John. Is there anything from the select board that is of interest to the HC?
Not at the moment. Look at last night's agenda. I think something did occur to me during last week's meeting. Oh, we were talking about membership terms. We were, the chair, Nico, and Selectwoman Sheola Levy got together and looked at our select board policy on committees and meeting frequency, and we do have something about attendance, performance. And the question, of course, had come up about term limits.
Oh, yes.
And their recommendation was to not have term limits because of a situation like ours where we just don't get people to participate. So you may volunteer to continue because you know, you're not inclined to let the commission suffer or what have you. But I recommended there was a informal policy. It wasn't in the ordinance, so the planning board did it. I'm not sure, maybe the zoning board did it, where somebody was a voting member for whatever number of terms, 2 terms, And then they rotated down to alternate, and an alternate rotated.
Conservation used to do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be wise, because it feels like, an alternate might never get to be a full member
Right.
otherwise.
Right, although that hasn't been the case
No.
recently.
We have, I
None
don't
of
know if
them.
we've ever had an alternate.
Well, not for us, some and other boards that have alternates.
The Conservation Commission got all filled up, and then we lost a couple people right in a row.
Then they're gone. But that rule came about in the 90s, and I remember,
It just sort of fell off.
and I remember the reasons.
And so there's that to consider, and I'm pushing that strongly because I think you need the institutional knowledge, so you have to have somebody serve more than one, you have to have a group, maybe a majority that has served more than one term, because we have only 3-year terms, and you'll have different situations, like we might go 3 years without a demolition review, which I think we probably have, and then this year it's just been a plethora of them. So that was part of it, was to keep the institutional knowledge, but then we also want to get the alternates to have a chance to learn how a meeting works and what they have to consider, and to learn the materials, et cetera, and then move into feeling comfortable about it, move into a voting position. Although I'll tell you, I served on the CBA for 4 or 5 years, and I was put on as a voting member the first night I was there. I was appointed as an alternate. It's like, oh, you're voting tonight. Okay. The other thing was that they're proposing that each committee and commission present a master plan, with goals for the upcoming year. So for us, it might be, changing some legislation to make this work better for us, or we want to do a survey on that area, or this is, whatever we come up with. But some goals for the year, and there's a question about when to do that. Because of, I know the particular grants that we are available to us because of being a Heritage Commission or a Historic District Commission. There are certain grants that are specific to those, and they have a similar time frame. So then the question is whether we make that goal setting somewhere during the budget cycle, such that we can be sure to get the matching grants if we find we need them to be put into the budget, or recommended for the budget. But there's still some question that you really might want to do it when you change over who's chairman, when you change over the election of officers, which is in May. And then just to review the master plan goals, when you're setting your goals for this season. So that was really the only thing that came up that would affect us.
Yeah. You have to submit an end-of-year summary, right?
It's on you, man, yeah.
I know that. Is there a deadline? Is that the end of the year? Is that the December or a January
Yeah, it's for the
deadline?
town report.
Okay.
So Pam will start sending you out notices anytime soon.
Okay. Fair enough.
But it's about the year, the calendar year, not the appointment year.
Okay.
I think in the past, John has written very nice ones, so you can look at some former reports.
Yeah, they've let us, encourage us to do photographs as well, so.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we don't usually have a very long thing to talk about this year.
Yeah.
I think all the demolitions are a good.
Might be the story of 2021.
I know that. You
Put pictures.
invited me to help.
This is what we
one
lost
time.
this year.
Yeah.
Right. In memoriam.
I've got copies of them.
Yeah, yeah,
that you can.
yeah. I think you invited me last year to
Yeah.
assist with your draft. So,
Yeah.
no worries, we can do that.
So it'll be due, when's our deliberative session?
It's February, right?
Yeah, it's like
It's gotta be in by
it's the first
January.
Saturday. Yeah, I think it's due at the end of
All right.
January, but the sooner the better, towards the end of December.
Okay,
You'll get notice from Pam McElroy.
all right.
And
Motion.
call Barbara, but I know for the details of how many demolition reviews we've had or
Yeah,
regular meetings, any changes we've made to procedure or something like
yeah. Can do. Is there a motion to adjourn?
that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.